Why, like point blank, are there more than 350 people on the terror watch list in our country getting arrested at the American border trying to...
We've got Justin Trudeau rounding up all the premiers across Canada to have an emergency meeting about Donald Trump's tariffs.
Did you hear about the CTV reporter who left Trudeau speechless? In a shocking confrontation, David E. exposed a massive security breach at our borders that's putting all Canadians at risk. You won't believe how many terror suspects have slipped through the cracks, but that's not all. Trump is now threatening huge tariffs on Canadian goods, and Trudeau seems completely unprepared. Watch as the Prime Minister squirms under tough questions and struggles to defend his weak border policies. This video reveals the full story they don't want you to know. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So did you click the subscribe button? Great, thank you so much. Now back to the video. The nation watched in stunned silence as CTV reporter David E. confronted Prime Minister Trudeau on live television. With tensions already high over Canada's border security, David E. dropped a bombshell that left viewers glued to their screens. As cameras rolled, the intrepid reporter revealed classified border crossing statistics that had been kept hidden from the public. The numbers were staggering. Trudeau's face visibly paled as David E. read out,
Appear united on one thing this week. Donald Trump's threat to impose 25% tariffs on Canadian imports is a big problem. They're less united, however.
President Trump, when he says we need to tighten up the border, we need to tighten up the border. The federal government needs to have a plan. We don't need a plan a month down the road. We need a plan now.
Figure after damning figure, each one painting a picture of a border in crisis. Cabinet members seated behind Trudeau couldn't hide their shock. Minister of Public Safety, Marco Mendicino's jaw literally dropped. Foreign Affairs. Minister Melanie Joly furiously scribbled notes, her brow furrowed with concern. The tension in the room was electric as David E. paused, clearly building to something big. Then came the moment that would dominate headlines for weeks to come. David E. locked eyes with the Prime Minister and demanded, Mr. Trudeau, how do you explain 358 terror suspects entering the United States from Canada on your watch? The silence that followed was deafening. Trudeau, known for his smooth talking and camera-ready charm, was at a complete loss for words. He stammered and stuttered, unable to form a coherent response to this explosive revelation. As Trudeau floundered, the camera caught a glimpse of Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland. Her face was a mask of fury. But was it directed at the reporter for asking such a damaging question, or at her boss for his spectacular failure to address it? The Prime Minister's non-answer spoke volumes. Here was undeniable proof of a massive security failure, one that put both Canadian and American lives at risk. And the man in charge had absolutely no defense. While Trudeau struggled to defend his border policies, an economic time bomb was ticking. Trump's surprise move left Canadian politicians scrambling and exposed deep divisions within the country. The response to this crisis would make or break careers, and potentially an entire nation. Out of nowhere, Trump dropped a bombshell that sent shockwaves through Canada. He threatened to slap a massive 25% tariff on Canadian imports. This wasn't just some minor trade dispute. We're talking about the potential destruction of Canada's economy. Ontario alone does $500 billion in two-way trade with the US.
I think we have a strong case to make that those tariffs are badly placed if the priority for President Trump is to reduce the cost for Americans.
Across the borders to make sure that it's not just the president and his administration, but the citizens understand the implications.
Imagine what a 25% tax on that would do to Canadian businesses and jobs. As news of Trump's threat spread, Canadian premiers rushed into an emergency meeting. But instead of presenting a united front, they were totally divided on how to respond. Some leaders actually sided with Trump, admitting he had a point about Canada's border security problems. Meanwhile, Ontario's Doug Ford came out swinging, declaring, "We're going to make sure that we do retaliate on those tariffs. That is the only option if they start putting 25% tariffs on the backs of Canadians and Canadian businesses." The cracks in Trudeau's leadership were starting to show. Even members of his own party were turning against him, shocked by his weak handling of the border crisis and now this tariff threat. As pressure mounted from all sides, Canadians held their breath waiting to see how Trudeau would respond. Would he finally step up and show some backbone, or cave to Trump's demands? When Trudeau finally spoke, it was a total letdown. His statement was vague, non-committal, and showed zero leadership.
They want a strong voice at the head of the table right now, and it's unclear if they feel like that is happening. Trying to figure out right now what is going on.
Wants to see. Certainly, we heard from premiers in the lead up to this call. They're looking for specifics around a plan of attack, not just we did this once, we can do it again.
He basically ignored the valid concerns Trump had raised about border security. Opposition leaders tore into Trudeau, saying he was completely unequipped to deal with Trump's aggressive tactics. The situation was looking dire. Kevin O'Leary, a big-name Canadian businessman, warned that a 25% tariff would devastate both countries. With billions of dollars and countless jobs on the line, Canadians were losing faith in Trudeau by the minute. Polls showed growing anger over his mishandling of U.S. relations. As the crisis deepened, more and more people started calling for new leadership. Trudeau's carefully crafted image as a strong, capable leader was crumbling before our eyes. With the border in chaos and Canada's economic future hanging in the balance, one huge question loomed. How much longer could Trudeau hold on to power? The border crisis and tariff threat have exposed Trudeau's leadership failures like never before. His weak response to security concerns and economic threats has left Canadians feeling vulnerable and abandoned. As public trust crumbles, a wave of change is building across the country. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is emerging as a formidable challenger, gaining support with his tough stance on border security and economic policies.
Challenge for Prime Minister Trudeau is to keep that front united. It's going to be very difficult. I mean, Premier Ford talking about borders, Premier Legault certainly all in about borders. They're saying Trump is right.
Trudeau, irrelevant. Doesn't matter.
What does any of this have to do with starting a trade war? Like, why can't you develop relationships with our allies?
It's not a trade war when you get in sync with these two economies. There's no way on earth.
Investments in the CBSA, those types of resources are what is going towards fortifying the...
His recent non-confidence motion against Trudeau reflects the growing frustration many Canadians feel. Unlike the current PM, Poilievre seems ready to stand up to Trump and protect Canadian interests. With an election on the horizon, more and more voters are questioning Trudeau's ability to lead. Can Canada afford to keep a leader who seems powerless in the face of real threats? Or is it time for new blood to take the reins and steer the country in a stronger direction? The answer may determine Canada's future for years to come.